in the auditorium and at the remote locations? While Ray is returning back to the BTC area, I want to just remind you in terms of where we are at this point in the program. We wanted to do a wrap up, a brief summary and kind of a reflection on where we are today as a look ahead for tomorrow. We have quite a number of presentations tomorrow. In the morning, we'll start with the perspectives from the programs, from EM, from science, and NNSA. And so again, I encourage you to come back for that. It'll be similar to what we did this morning. We heard the remarks from our acting Secretary, Daniel Poneman, followed by other remarks from the Defense Board to kind of set the stage for and sort of the charge for the group for the day. So tomorrow we'll hear that from the programs. And then again, we'll move towards the specifics. We were hopeful today, and I've heard from a few of you, and I hope that is true for most, that we were able to bring you up to where we are with these various activities, that we were able to show, or you would hear from the acting secretary, the DOE's commitment, and the remarks from the Defense Board that will talk about, their concerns and their analysis and things that they've seen, and that we're all in this in different ways, but we're all working towards how do we improve in the area of work planning and control. Then to follow with the task, because again, it's good to showcase the people that have been doing the work in this area so you could hear from them personally. And it also was their plea, their opportunity to have you become part of their task in some way, that you are providing information or questions or comments. And I heard from someone today that don't wait for RevCom. Let's talk as we go along. And so certainly that was one of the intents of also having the leads kind of status where they were in those areas today. And then to move from the tasks that we're developing to specific examples or activities or things that are going on. And it was good to hear about the work management, sort of the history and how long they've been involved, and the thinking and the casting and making sure that we understand that this is where the work planning and control activities are going on with FCOG as well. I think that was kind of good. From time to time in my interactions with FCOG, I try to understand the bending and the naming and where things are. So it's always good to things that are close to our and dear to our hearts, that we know where they are in the organizations where they may have a slightly different name or whatever it is. And so we still have some work to do, and we want to be able to, get these products out and do the various things and begin to see how well we can sustain and reach further improvements, by using the various tools. So for the presenters that presented that are not part of the regular task, we will have your presentation material that will be useful. But if there are other things that you need to pass on to the task groups, please do so. That would help them understand better what you're doing and things that they can use. Because we still, like I say, we still have a bit of work to do to get the handbook, the guide, the CRADs, out. And so any information that would help, what do you need in the real world or things you're doing in the real world would certainly be helpful, to those groups. And again, if there are additional insights or information or lessons learned on the ISM clauses that you want to pass on, please do so. Why don't I pause and hear from some of you, or if there are some areas, or if you're not sure where we're going, because I'm saying I think that what we tried to do today was to bring you along and bring you up to speed in terms of where we are, so that we kind of walk together in completing some of these various actions. And so we certainly need your help and your insights and your comments and feedback. Are there anybody can jump in? Yes, please.
In reflecting on today's talks, and on behalf of the FCOG Work Management Group, one thing we wanted to throw out to discuss is that through our assist visits, we have noticed that people struggle with the balancing act of what makes a good work control document. How detailed should that work document be? And we have seen evidence of work control documents that have so much in the document it becomes an unuseful tool for the workers. So one thing I wanted to put out for discussion is that the recommendations that came from the analysis that was performed, we talked, I believe I saw in there that some of the lessons learned was that work control documents can be confusing to the worker. And yet I think a couple of slides later I saw about the incorporation of lessons learned in work control documents. And I'm just going to throw out as a potential caution is that in the field we struggle with what that means. Incorporation of applicable lessons learned and maybe not multiple printouts added onto a work control document where a worker turns off their thinking cap, or how long should we incorporate those lessons learned? As an example, a lessons learned on a fire sprinkler head, if we give out that same lessons learned multiple times, pretty soon the technician turns off his thinking cap. Mm-hmm. So we struggle continuously with examples and again, like a balancing act of what makes a good, solid work control document.
Pat?
Yes,
if I could address Donna's comment, because I think in my experience, the 2 points that I would like to make on that distinction is that there is a distinction between the work control documents and the work documents. In other words, the work control documents is a lot of the background information that goes into planning and authorizing the work. What we hand to the worker in the work package should be only that information that the worker needs to complete the work to avoid that overload and that confusion on his point. And I think that's where we often get wrapped around the axle in DOE, that we hand a worker a work package that's 2 inches thick to go out and change a light bulb, when what he really needs is that one sheet of information that describes the specific steps that he's going to take and the controls that he's going to implement, as opposed to a lot of the background. That doesn't mean we don't have those documents somewhere available to reference, but we don't always have to hand it to the worker.
I appreciate that, Brad, and maybe it's that distinction, because some of the experience shows that we refer to those maybe as a field-ready work package. And so, again, that terminology, I think you hit it dead on, that terminology of what the expectation is of a work control document versus what is in the field for all types of work, research and development to maintenance. What is it that the worker needs, and what's that relevance, so that we don't turn off or lose something important in a 30-page document. I appreciate
and you had made a second comment about that. I was trying to remember exactly what it was.
I have no idea.
If it comes back to me, I'll step up.
See,
Yes.
Pat, this is Ray Corey.
Yes.
I think that those two comments are extremely critical to doing this right. You know, we all struggle with that issue. Work packages that are too broad, that aren't specific enough to control the work, yet overwhelming the worker with too much information. We just had a Hanford site-wide safety culture survey, and the number one comment we got from the workforce is our work packages and our ES&E systems are too complex. They're too bulky for them. I think, to me, the crucial thing to think about, especially when you're talking to the worker, is going back to the ISM 5 core functions. What the workers really need to understand is what are the hazards of being exposed to, and what controls are you putting in place to control those hazards. And we have to keep focused on that, because we tend to throw a lot of bells and whistles in place in our work packages that take away from workers' understanding of those fundamentals. So to me, that's the key crucial thing. Even in a high complex work environment, you still got to go back to ISM 5 core functions for the workers.
Yeah. I remembered what her second question was, and that had to deal with lessons learned. And that is, how long do we continue printing out that same lesson learned and putting it into the work package? And my response on that is that just because we've printed out a lesson learned and included it in the work package doesn't mean we've learned the lesson. What we need to do is to, rather than just print it out and put it into the work package, we need to look at that and take it and look at our system and what are our systemic controls that we have in place. Is there something we need to change in our work planning and control process or in our work training requirements based on what that event was or that lesson learned was? And that once we've incorporated that lesson into the system, now we have taught the system the lesson, not just the worker, and that's when we don't have to keep printing it out and putting it into the work package.
There was another comment back here.
Yeah, this is Ted Geltz from Hammer. Changing the subject a little bit, we have to remember that all of these tools that we're talking about, and the work packages and the work control documents, all have people involved. And I think as a part of this guide development, we need to remember that we've got very senior, experienced people that bring a lot of mentoring and capability with them. But on the other hand, we have a lot of new people who do not understand the DOE culture, and they may come from commercial. And operating in a commercial environment and a DOE environment is different. Their leadership skills are not as high as maybe we would like them to be. Their communication skills are not as high as we'd like them to be. So their personal one-to-one interface when they're talking to their employees as a part of the safety culture is it's the listening abilities. It's how do you talk to an employee? How do you deal with an employee who's having a crisis at the moment? Those basic interpersonal skills, I think we need not only to build into the work activity, but I think that needs to become a bigger part of our overall ISM world, because we have to remember our people are our asset, and as we heard this morning, we have to rely on their skills to interpret what we're trying to tell them coming out of these efforts.
These are very important comments because these tasks that will generate products, they're ongoing, and I think it's good to talk about the balance between how much detail you want, in these documents or things that you ultimately will give to the workers versus some others that require reading or something when lessons learned come out so that people are reading it and they're understanding it rather than putting it in the work package itself. But I think all of these are things that we want to think about, and we want to make the system, something that's value added on the back end. But one of the things that I think about, and Brad knows this about me, he'd probably be kind if he had to describe it in my presence. I'm not really very savvy computer person, but when we talk about kind of changing in a work environment or workers, and over time we're bringing in a younger group of workers that were born with computers, and their approach to looking at documents and looking at work plan and control processes and where do you go for information might be different or whatever it is. And so we need to also keep those things in mind. But I think that right now we're trying to work on what are our expectations for work plan and control at the activity level, and what kinds of things we want to govern that, and what do we want to come out of the back end. What is it that we're trying to make sure that the ultimate outcome of the tasks that we're doing. But it certainly is complex, and we need a lot of diverse views and thinking on how to do that. So these discussions are good. Like I said, the more we talk today and tomorrow, your emails will be more pointed. I'm following up on what we discussed at the meeting rather than a whole new idea or a new comment. So please keep going on the line as well. Ray and others, we're looking for you all to keep the conversation going in terms of kind of where we are today. Are there other areas that we need to revisit from today, or elaborate a little bit more on anything that we said, or is it something about sort of the path forward that you don't understand or that you have some disagreement with that we need to talk about now? Yes.
Pat, Joe Yannick. Go to the speaker.
Just,
Thanks, Joe. Joe Yannick from Flora. On all the documents that we've got kind of in the mill, circulating, we heard about today, is there a master project schedule that's got them all integrated, that kind of at a level one that just says, okay, we've got this going on, this going on, this go on, and that incorporates RevCom time or other reviews and internal reviews? I mean, I think that'd be helpful if we don't have it.
We have the November 30th letter, which is high level, and it said, here are the things we're doing, and it was our best estimate on the time required to do that. And then for the different tasks, for example, the different tasks they've developed, a schedule and a program plan, some more, detailed than others, about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and they all feed back into this 11:30 letter that went out. And maybe one of the outcomes of this meeting should be, a little bit more detailed document
I
about
think,
these different tasks, so that it'll make it easier. And that will be part of, I don't know if you looked at the cover of the agenda. There was a cover that says proceedings will be issued. It'll include A, B, C, and D, and actions and path forward, or whatever it is. So that's part of that proceeding in terms of where do we go from here. That's one of the outcomes, expected outcomes
Well,
of this
I mean,
meeting.
for your consideration, I think an integrated project schedule that shows all the various items, even at just the level 1 level, that, we can track progress against, or we can at least give everybody a visual picture of, all the steps that are required for all this to tie together would be excellent, just for
And-
your consideration.
And I appreciate the comment. We understand it. It was part of the vision about when we leave the meeting and we put the proceedings together, that we're able to, that people that weren't here or people that come in, they get involved later, can kind of see this is where you're going and this is what it, what it means. So that's an expected outcome. So hopefully we don't have these gaps when we do that, but that's, the goal. People were jumping up and down when we were talking, so you can go now. You can not leave the room, but you can, if you have your comments, please.
Hello? Yep, I just got one. This is Roger Claycomb from DOE Idaho. Okay, we're all fascinated with gadgets and gizmos. Everybody has to have the latest smartphone that does all these things for us. And while a lot of the tools that we talked about can be valuable aids in planning and executing work, I haven't found any of those electronic gadgets or tools yet that take the place of a set of people in a room, in a hazardous environment, where you're looking around going, what if that boom fell when this guy was doing this job, and how do I prevent it from hurting somebody? So tools are great things, but they can also be crutches that we over-rely on. So.
Yes, you look like you want to jump in. All right, we have one.
Yeah, Pat, this is Jim Winter, and one observation I had was from a couple of presentations. Steele Coddington provided one on safety culture and got into assist visits at a time, and Donna Governor followed up on those assist visits. And I found it interesting that we were able to express the subgroup and how many sites were participating in that subgroup. But I would also encourage, and we don't have obviously the slide up there to show kind of what sites aren't participating, but I think there's just so much value in all the sites joining in this subgroup in terms of what they would be able to contribute and also be able to learn, especially on these assist visits, whether they are a host site or whether they are participants within the assist team, that there's just any number of dynamics, not that I've ever been associated with them, but from the dynamics that I've heard and seen through this work group, I think there's a lot of benefit that each site can have, as well as the DOE complex as a whole. So.
Thank you, Jim. In my previous life, when I was on the oversight side of the house, I think that every review that I did, I probably learned as much or more than I was able to share, with the sites. I mean, the assist visits, it's a win-win, no question about it. Everybody will come out a winner, and everybody will be better. You'll be able to take things back to improve at your site, and there'll be some insights from you that will help them to improve as well. So it really is a good thing. Ray, you're now visible. Can we also hear you? Oh, both.
Yeah,
Yes.
one,
Okay.
yep. I was going to say, one thought I had is probably more for you and I, Pat, than anybody else, but one of the lessons learned from this, I think, is taking a more systematic approach to FCOG improvements and seeing when and how we should incorporate those into the DOE system more formally. So we heard from Steele and from John this morning on some work on safety culture into CRADs, and that's an example of something as they develop that, we should think about how we do that. Obviously also work out of the CAS system and other places. So just a thought for you and I, more so than anybody else, to pay attention to that and stay on top of that.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else?
Pat, this is John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. And I can see
I
you.
would just like to, oh, good. I've been thinking a lot about this integration of the safety culture attributes into the work planning and control activities. When I think, when I see typical evaluations of safety culture, there's usually a special review of just that topic. There might be interviews, there might be a survey, there might be some focus groups or that sort of thing, maybe a few observations of work in the field. But this was an interesting one because I think work planning and control really does reflect how an organization thinks, in a way, probably as much or more than any other process. So if we can, or if we are successful at figuring out how to evaluate safety culture attributes in a process like this, I really think it would provide a lot more detail and relevant information to evaluating an organization's safety culture beyond our standard methods of doing it. So I think there's a lot more to come on this topic.
Thank you, John, for that comment. I remember when we started the FCOG safety culture work group many years ago, certainly was a lot of energy associated with it and a lot of progress, I believe, made during that time. And so it's always good to come back and reflect again and, where do you go from there? So we need to keep that in mind, keep thinking about how we could best do that in this climate where we have a lot of other things in safety culture going on as well. But we should continue to talk about it.
I think it relates quite a bit to the presentation this morning that Dan Bowen gave and Steve DeMotor. I heard a lot of that kind of information in there and factors, that we could be looking at a lot better involving safety culture of things that they're seeing are typical problems, with work planning and control issues.
Yeah, this is Ed Parsons. I'm at RL also at the moment. And just a little bit of a follow-up to John's comments is that one thing I think we need to be a little cautious of is that when we're looking at safety culture, that the evaluation of safety culture and the skill set needed for the evaluators is typically different than what you need for people doing either mechanical type reviews or programmatic reviews or systematic reviews, so that our approach to doing safety culture evaluations probably needs to be a subset with people trained specifically to do behavioral observations and behavioral analysis versus people just doing systems evaluations. And so I'm thinking in the sense of those of us that do a lot of ISM verifications. I know our discussions are heading towards incorporating the attributes of a good safety culture in ISM verifications, and my thoughts wander to the point I need a different skill set for doing that component than I do for the rest of the type of evaluations.
Hello, Ed. It's good to hear your voice.
Hi, Pat.
I don't know if you recall, from 2007 on, every year we had what we worked with FCOG. In some cases, we had exactly the same. In some cases, some minor modifications to it. But we had what we call on the DOE side, sort of our top shelf high priorities. And if you go back and look at that from 2007 on, for a long time, we had both. We had safety culture and we had work planning and control. we recognized they were both important, they were both needed, that they were related, and who's on first and second. I don't know how if we ever decided that, but it has been the thinking of the integrated safety management, folks for a long time, that safety culture, work planning and control are key components related, integrated to the success of integrated safety management. And so but again, certainly it's complex. We ought to keep thinking about it, talking about it, what we ought to do. I don't think there's any disagreement among the audience that it certainly is related, and how do we work with that to get to more improvements in the work planning and control arena.